Swadika, a big hello from Chiang Mai, Thailand. Today's show is all about creating your ideal lifestyle.
Welcome to the Mastering Fulfillment podcast, where we focus on bridging your success with fulfillment in your personal, business, and spiritual life. And now your hosts, Scott Berry and Joshua Wenner.
So today, as we currently record this, I am looking out my window and I am currently in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and my wife and I are on our third month from a 4-month excursion / honeymoon, and we're currently in Thailand traveling all throughout Southeast Asia, and I thought it would be really relevant since it's a current topic in my life today about how do we craft and curate our ideal lifestyle.
Yeah, I love that, Scott. You know, a lot of people may be listening thinking, 4-month honeymoon? Is that possible? How do they make that happen? I couldn't do that in my situation. I wouldn't want to do that in my situation. Or, man, that sounds epic. How did you do it? So curious, maybe talk a little bit more, for you guys. How did you get to doing 3 months into a 4-month honeymoon? How did you guys get there? And is it something that you guys just did on a whim? Is it something that you had been planning for a while? Maybe tell a little bit more about how you made this happen or how you guys got here.
Yeah, so a little bit about our background story. We have been here for about 3 months. This is something that Michelle and I had been looking at doing for quite a while. It's something that we had discussed about doing and something that we realized had been a passion of both of ours, and we'd been wanting to take this trip and really do it as kind of a honeymoon and do it as something that was an expression of our love. But as we're kind of into this trip, we're realizing that this is something that we're looking to bring more into our experience. This isn't something obviously that we're not going to be looking at doing every single year, but as we're traveling, we're realizing just how in alignment it is with our hearts right now and how alignment it is with our soul, and just how just good and refreshing that it feels to be able to, like I say, we're in Chiang Mai right now, and yesterday we were walking around the markets and getting coffee at this cute little shop that's right next to this 700-year-old temple, and experiencing the sights and the sounds and the smell of the culture, riding tuk-tuks around and integrating with the beautiful people of Thailand, and just recognizing how much that's just really fulfilling our hearts and how much kind of perspective it's giving us to how we want to live our lifestyle. And when I say that we are kind of doing this as our honeymoon, we got married 2 years ago. So it's not like we got married, just a few months ago. We got married actually over 2 months ago. 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago. And this is something that we didn't do on a whim, but we had been thinking about it for quite a while. So it took us a little bit to really set up our life in a way that allowed us to take off for 4 months. And part of our intentionality was, okay, what exactly are we looking to do? What is fulfilling for us? And 4 months takes a little bit of planning. And part of this process is being able to integrate the work-life balance. And so we're still working a little bit while we're here. We're still keeping the energy up on our projects and still bringing in monetary income, but setting up in a way that we're still very present to what this experience is like. And so we're more than happy to kind of dive into some of the steps that I did to get here. And then what we're also going to be wanting to talk about today is getting clarity on what that ideal lifestyle is for you. And obviously the reason why we're bringing up travel is because it's very relevant to what's going on with me. I'm looking at the beautiful mountains from our villa right now in Chiang Mai, and we can see some of the street vendors and whatnot outside. So I'm in the thick of it right now. But it's also kind of a common theme that we get with our clients and our friends at large about some of the things that they're looking to incorporate into their lifestyle that's really fulfilling for them. That's something that they're really passionate about. But travel is just one item. It just happens to be a pretty big common thread item for a lot of people. But for you listening, that may be something different. And so getting clarity on, at the end of your life, and you look back and you feel, wow, that was really fulfilling. I'm glad that this was incorporated into my life and into my lifestyle. What is that for you? Is going to the community college and learning a new trait every few months? Or is it taking little excursions with your significant other? Is it going fishing? Is it, whatever it happens to be, getting clarity on what that is. And also, if you're in a long-term relationship, seeing if that matches up with your significant other as well, and finding out where do those items cross, where do they align and where do they not align, and then how do you deal with that, right? Sometimes it's so dramatic that to really live the ideal lifestyle that you're looking to do, maybe it's not compatible, or maybe it's compatible, but you guys do it in a completely different manner. So we're going to tackle some of those questions and get into some Q&A on how I'm living my life and how Josh is living with his life, and also some of the struggles that also come about in the questions and anxiety that comes about crafting your ideal lifestyle.
Yeah, you brought up a really interesting topic. I was talking to a friend and client yesterday, and we were talking about retirement. And it's so interesting. So many people spend their lives making this money, stacking it away to one day retire. And then they go to try to spend the money and enjoy the lifestyle, but their bodies have changed. Sometimes they don't have the same energy levels as they used to. And the things that they would have wanted to do when they were younger aren't quite the same when they're older. And so we were talking about, if you were retiring now, what would you go do? And, like if you're building a plan for retirement and you were saving this money and you could say, okay, by the time I die, I liked how you said that, Scott, what are my bucket list items? How do I want to look back on my life? The rocking chair test. If I'm sitting in my rocking chair talking to my grandkids or my great-great-grandkids or my kids or just some friends, how do I want to be remembering my life? What do I want to have experienced? What are those bucket list items is the envisioning part. And then instead of saying I'll do them someday, I think grounding it into now, saying, okay, on all these bucket list items, if you're just financially abundant, you could just start paying them off. But if you're not, how do you start to integrate your life a little bit so you can start to say, man, if I did one of these a year, or if I did one of these a month, or I did one of these a quarter, what would be a real game changer? And I know for me personally, there was a point when I worked so much. I was in corporate land and I worked a lot. And I was kind of like, you get your 2 weeks off a year. And those 2 weeks, I had to be really careful what I use those 2 weeks for. And I even know a lot of people who don't even use their 2 weeks. And for some people, that may be fulfilling. Maybe they find fulfillment with really simple things and taking a walk and, maybe camping on the weekends. Or I have some friends that are really big into fitness and they just love their fitness. And so I think as we dive into this, it's asking those questions. What brings you fulfillment? And how do you know what that means? Like, to me, when I feel fulfillment, I feel expansive. I feel open. I feel like, yes, I have moments of taking my breath away, of joy, of kind of like anticipation of what's next, of adventure, of exploratory. Those are the moments that juice me and allow me to feel really fulfilled and content. And so I remember being in a place of corporate land where I was like, you know what, this 2 weeks off isn't fitting it. And I also realized I have a number of bucket list items. I really feel like I need a month to month and a half to start creating what I want. And I think for me personally, a big part of me moving into entrepreneurship was more about the lifestyle in creating my ideal lifestyle. And what I recognize with entrepreneurs is they work harder than most people I've seen, at least the entrepreneurs that I was observing and putting myself around. They were all making $1 million a year. And the thing I noticed in common is they all worked. Like there wasn't the 9 to 5 weekends off. It was kind of like always working, and the weekends blended in with the week. But then what I also observed is when they wanted to go somewhere, they just went. And they would take off for 5 days or 5 days, 7 days, 2 weeks, or in your case, Scott, 4 months. And I realized, wow, okay, part of creating my ideal lifestyle is changing, recreating my life and setting my life up in a way where I can generate income, add value, do what I love, but still have that free time to go explore. So if somebody's listening right now, what was your process to first figuring out, setting yourself up in a way where you can travel and still make money, in case they're questioning that? Like, how do you even get in that? How do you even position yourself? Because you used to be in corporate too.
I did. And it's interesting what you mentioned earlier about the 2 weeks. This process is all about getting clarity on what is actually fulfilling to you right now. And that may change, and you can only speculate on what that's going to look like down the line, because what's fulfilling to you in your 20s is definitely going to be different than what's fulfilling to you in your 50s and 60s. But I did come from corporate, and when I got into corporate, I had a few different marketing jobs. That's my degree is in business sales and marketing, and migrated through a few different companies, ended up at this small firm doing tech sales. And at the time, it was cutthroat, boiler room, and 2 weeks off a year. After 2 years, I got my third week off. And you would think, wow, you're only getting 2 weeks off a year. We're traveling right now all through Southeast Asia. We're meeting people from all over the world, from New Zealand and Australia and Spain. And most of the people that, especially from Europe, they're traveling for 3 weeks, they're traveling for 4 weeks, they get 7 weeks off a year, and they're always surprised about the number of weeks that we get off. But at the time, I was in my 20s, and I was getting into sales, and I loved what I did. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I loved connecting with my customers. I loved the people that I was working with. And so what was fulfilling for me then wasn't necessarily lots of time off to travel, even though I did like to travel, and I did still take little trips here and there. But what was fulfilling to me was building my business, building myself in the corporate ladder. And that was really fulfilling. I loved it. I was trying to recruit all of my friends to get jobs. I've got a few of my friends to come work with me, and I loved it. I was building skills and, getting more confident as I was going out and flying and making sales calls and making stuff happen. It felt really good. I was making really good money at the time, and so that was really fulfilling to me. And as I was there, I was probably there maybe 8 years, and things started to shift. And if you've ever gone to my website, my whole kind of background story about how I kind of shifted from corporate is on there. But to give you the bite-sized version, I was looking at kind of branching off and doing my own thing, but at that time I was getting a little bit burnt out. I'd been there for 8 years and I was doing really well, but the vibe of the corporate landscape had shifted a little bit. But what had shifted more was me. And the quality of conversations in the office at the water cooler, I just didn't care anymore. I was reading all these new books and exposing myself to these new things, and I was very excited about being in an environment that was supportive of that, and I was not getting that at work. And so I was looking to kind of branch off and do my own thing, and one of the criteria was I wanted to make sure that I had enough time to travel a little bit more. I also wanted to make sure I had enough time to be able to take courses and to go to these different places that were very inspiring to me and that were really fulfilling to me. What I needed wasn't necessarily money, but I needed time. And so I made sure that whatever my next endeavor was, that it was set up in a way that I could be compensated monetarily virtually, that I didn't have to be tied to a physical location. And so what that did is that really opened up the opportunity for me to make money everywhere, anywhere. And so I've had the privilege of living I lived in South Africa for 4 months or 3.5 months and volunteered for a while. And I wanted to learn Spanish. So I was in Costa Rica for 3.5 months, and all while still being able to work and bring in money. And so as beautiful and idealistic as that lifestyle sounds, and I'm so honored to be able to live it, before I could take any of those long-term, 3, 4, 5-month excursions, I had to build. And as you mentioned earlier about being an entrepreneur, is that kind of vision of creating that lifestyle, I had to keep reminding myself of it, because when I started my business, I was lucky if I took off 1 day a week. I was working 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week. I mean, putting in a ton of time, a ton of my own capital to build this vision. And so I had to sacrifice quite a bit. And, I hired a coach to help me stay on track to make sure that I was always keeping that higher vision kind of in my long-term view, but while still making sure I had accountability of creating the kind of immediate steps of getting myself there.
And I love where you're going with it, because my experience has been the same. Whenever I've made a big jump, even more recently, I find the coach is really helpful. Even if you're highly motivated and you've already jumped, I find it's the accountability. It's somebody to process with, almost like, here's all this stuff going on. Like, what do I work on now? Yeah. And even if you can break it into chunks. You can talk through things with somebody. You don't feel like you're taking their time. It's like that they're showing up just to help you be accountable to the vision you've created. And so I think that's a really important aspect of it. And that was really, I think, one of the biggest game changers for me more recently as well. So I love that. I didn't know you did that with your process as well. It's really interesting. And then after you set up your business, I know you've set up a business, and did it take you a year? Did it take you 2 years? How long did it take you to set up your business where you working 68 hour weeks, where then you were in a place to start taking trips?
It was about 2 years. I was able to start to see the fruits of it. So it wasn't like I went from 2 years and all of a sudden I had 4 months. It was 2 years, and through that process, especially with having a good environment of support, right? Not just my coach, but also having good friends to bounce us off with, such as yourself and other people that I know that have been successful entrepreneurs. Through that process, and even with those first couple years, I was able to take longer weekend trips and then still be able to respond about business. So the way that I was kind of like crafting my work-life balance was kind of a work in progress and being molded, if you will, as I was starting to move forward. But it all stemmed from that place of, how do I want to set up my lifestyle? I wanted to make sure that if there was something going on in my life, that for the most part, I had an opportunity to be able to attend to it. So to give you an example, if all of a sudden my parents came into town and, my dad was visiting a friend and he's like, hey, I've got a few days open and I'm going to come see you, that I could set my life up in a way that even if I still had to work and be responsive, that if it's like, hey, let's go skiing, I'm going to be in town, that I could still do that, even if I had to take a little bit of time off to work. So I wanted to make sure that I was always kind of crafting that lifestyle that I wanted. And for me, that was having freedom to take a Friday off if I wanted to take a Wednesday off if I had to not feel weird or guilty if I had to do something else that was outside of the regular 9 to 5. For me, that process really kind of evolved over the last few years, where I was really learning how to work remotely. Now, once I became really masterful at that, and I became really, really good at it, I've closed very large deals on the beach in Costa Rica, into doing deals when I was out in the safari doing volunteering in Africa, being able to be resourceful that way. And I got really good at it. Now my process is, within the last couple of years, is how do I still be responsive to my clients, to my work colleagues, but not have to be the one always answering the calls. And so now I've got an amazing assistant. I have other people that I employ to help push the energy of my business without me having to physically respond. And so that's been part of my process, is how do I kind of offload a little of that? And, just to kind of get back to what we were saying, it took a little bit, it took a little bit for me to get back in that, but you're going to have to, there's going to usually have to be a little bit of sacrifice in order for you to get the fulfillment of what your ideal lifestyle is. And the bigger I think that picture is, there's going to be a little bit more sacrificing in the beginning, but always making sure that there's that kind of compelling vision to make sure that it keeps you going through those roadblocks and those speed bumps in which you're eventually going to run into. How do you keep motivated, and how do you keep going, and how do you keep that momentum in order for you to kind of get to where you want to get to?
I think there's a couple different really key points here, and it's the commonality that I'm observing as you were talking. I'm looking at it the same way. I mean, I took off last Tuesday because I just felt like taking a Tuesday off to go have a beach day with some buddies down in Laguna. And this week I'm taking off Wednesday through Sunday to go to how to buy and sell companies workshop in Austin. And it's funny, as I think back, I think last year I'm not at the level that you're of like 3-4 months, but I think I took 6 or 8 weeks off last year. And I look at where life is like now, and I look back to where I was before, and I think it does start. I think the biggest distinction is it takes time, and I think I had unrealistic expectations of it, and I think I would just jump in the past, and I would start something, and I'd have like a month savings, and I'd have all this pressure to do it, and I wouldn't be able to do it, and then I'd go back to these jobs that I wasn't fully fulfilled at. So one of the key distinctions I learned to getting here was one, a savings. So really being able to put a savings in place to get I had a year before I made this last jump, which has allowed me to live if the months are tough, or if I need to fund something, or I want to take off, you can. It gives you that time and that flexibility to build something. So you still have the pressure to build it, and you're still working hard, but I found it's a different type of pressure. It's the pressure to do it, but it's also the safety net of like, okay, I'm committed to this, and I can see this through to fully building it to sustain. And there's different ways to do it. Everybody's different. I know some people that just jump and they make it happen. For me, I found every time I would jump, I would get in hard, and I would run out of my reserves pretty quickly. And then when I would run out of my reserves, I would find myself going back to get a job because I needed to live. So for me, one of the core distinctions is, just like you said, we got to get clarity on the vision we want. How do we want life to look? And a lot of times it's from seeing people who are doing it. I had a couple buddies that would take off every Thursday, Friday and go skiing, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I'd see you've inspired me a lot. I've taken off and working in different countries for 2-3 months at a time. And you start to see different friends doing it and asking them, well, how are you doing this? Modeling their behavior and starting to see a lot of those same patterns. So I think getting clear on what you want it to look like. I think secondly is getting a little taste. And I think dipping your toe in the water is helpful because you may not always know if you like to travel. You may think, you may have this vision in your mind, like travel's amazing. Yep. And then I know for me, I took a 6-week backpacking trip with no plan. It was amazing. And for me, 4 weeks in, I was kind of like, I was solo, which may have had something to do with it, but I was kind of ready to get back to work and come back into the States and have some normalcy. So I was there 6 weeks, but I learned for me, I think either having somebody to do it with, or shorter trips that were a month or below is kind of the right mix for me. And then to come back as I'm finding the right fulfillment. So I like to do a lot of smaller trips, or at the most maybe a month. And so I think it's like dipping your toe in, figuring out what works, getting a little taste of it, having a savings plan, and then figuring out how you can create something or work for somebody or do something. To me, entrepreneurs makes the most sense because you create your own plan, but it's the most pressure. And I've seen a lot of people do it in other ways. So, how do you create a plan where you can start living it? And then I think as you start to live it, it gets addicting because then you're like, oh, wow, like I can do this and I can do this. But there's different type of pressures. And so I really like what you said, the sacrifice. Sometimes you're sacrificing working weekends when other people are, I know even now, like I worked all weekend this weekend because it was like, I got to get stuff done. So I feel like getting clear with what you want, getting a savings plan so you have a little bit of a buffer, dipping your toe in the water a little bit to see if those are things that you want to create more of and have more fun with, and then starting to work towards it and building a support network. I think those are all really good, kind of places to help get you there.
Yeah. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. It's about two things. It's getting clarity on what it is that you really want, and how do you create the resources in order to make that happen? The people, places, things in order to support that. The clarity is a really big one. I love that example that you gave. We just actually had a friend mutual friend that traveled around the world. They were on a sabbatical, quit their job, decided to take 1 month off. 1 year off. And, this person traveled for a whole year. India, Greece, Europe, I'm not sure all the countries. But when they got back, they had a great time, but there was a big revelation. What they said was, this is stuff I loved to do before. When I was younger, I traveled all around, going to hostels, meeting people. But in my early 40s, I also realized I don't quite enjoy traveling by myself internationally that much. It wasn't as enjoyable for me. And there was moments of, wow, this is really great and I like this, but I either would like to do something just a little bit more relaxed, maybe a weekend at the lake by myself, or if I'm going to do something bigger, I want to do it with a partner and I want to have shared experiences. And to me, that's more fulfilling. And so if you look at what their experience was, you think, wow, okay, well, so was that a failure? And it wasn't, even though they didn't quite do what they intended to do or what they thought was the most fulfilling for them. What they do have is they have clarity now. Clarity is one of those easier said than done things. It's hard to move into a fulfilling life. It's hard to move into bringing in these items that are going to be very fulfilling to you if you don't exactly know what they want. And sometimes we think we know, but we don't know. And the only way to get that kind of clarification is to actually jump in the water, or is to actually do it and then get the feedback later about what it is that we actually like to do. So it's, like you said, it's getting the clarity, and then it's also getting the resources in order to help. And, money is one of the bigger things. If you don't have enough money, it really hurts to be able to add a buffer or to allow you to do these other things. But money is just a part of it, right? Time is also the other part, and having a supportive network to make sure that you stay on track to kind of keep continuing. You also mentioned about entrepreneurship, how that can be one of the easiest paths to really create that ideal lifestyle. When I look back about what it is that I wanted to wake up to every day, how do I want to live my life? Like, what just feels really good to me? And taking 4 months off to travel with Michelle, we're in our third month right now. We've been all through Asia, and we've been buying one-way tickets everywhere. We've been on boats and sleeper trains and buses, and you name it. We've been everywhere, and it literally has been an ideal honeymoon. Like, I'm pinching myself about just how amazing it's been. We've had our ups and downs, but it really has been such an amazing trip. But if I really break it down and take myself, like you said, on my rocking chair, talking to my grandkids at 90, and I look back and I said, I've had such a great lifestyle. Little Susie goes, well, how come it was a great lifestyle? And what I would say to them is, I woke up and I got to experience the things that I love to do on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis. And these trips are part of it. But just as fulfilling for me is the fact that I can take a Wednesday off and not feel guilty about it. The fact that I know that there's this internal freedom that I have in order to do the stuff that I want to do, right? That if I want to take a Friday off, I can. And the fact that I can work when I need to work and when I want to work. I think that on a daily level feels so good. Like, I'm literally just getting goosebumps thinking about just how blessed I am to have that into my life. That, there are times when I'm in a project and I have to do work and I'm getting so into it that I'm literally working till 2 in the morning, and then I have to work all day and all night. But I also know the way that I work, I don't work on the way my natural rhythm and flow is. I don't work on a schedule from 8 to 5. I work when the creativity and the pull pushes me. So sometimes I'll work for a few hours and then I'll go out and I'll go do yoga or I'll go for a run, or like I'm a big nap person. I nap almost every single day and I get recharged for that. Whereas I couldn't do that at my last job. And actually that's almost it was a sign of like cowardness, that if you're not first one there, taking lunches and not being the last one to leave, there's a stigmatism against that. And that never felt right to me, and it does for some people. But for me, it's if I can work when inspiration calls, if I can work when my body is in alignment with it, that to be able to take off 3 hours in the middle of the day, but then work in the evening or work whenever I'm feeling called, to me, that's the ultimate freedom. That's the ultimate gift, to be able to just ebb and flow as my soul pulls me. Now, obviously, I have deadlines and there's other circumstances in which I have to kind of grit through and push through it. But the fact that I know that I can work when I need to work just feels really good. And so I don't feel guilt when I have to work 7 hours on a Sunday, or I have to work late into the night, or I have to work up at 2 in the morning, which being on this trip and I think it's a 14-hour difference that we have. We're 14 hours ahead, that I have to work really late at night sometimes when I have a lot of things going. I've done coaching calls definitely well into midnight and early in the morning, but that feels really good to me and that feels really free. So figure out what that is for you, and it doesn't have to be these grand things, but just on a daily lifestyle. If you love to play golf and you're like, if I could just hit some driving balls, just go out to the driver for 45 minutes in the middle of the day, it would shift everything. I would have more energy the rest of the day because I would just feel more free. Then how do we create that lifestyle? How do we start to create those little movements to something bigger? And they're always baby steps. And how do we start to create little wins? And as you mentioned before, in entrepreneurship, yes, that may be a very obvious way to create that lifestyle, but that's just one way. And the one thing that I get a lot is, well, I work in the 9 to 5, and that all sounds well and good, but I couldn't do that. I don't have that type of setup in my environment. And what I say to that is, no, you may not be able to take 4 months off, but the one thing that I will say, and I have had confirmation after confirmation after confirmation about this, is we can bring in so much more into our life than we actually realize. And it all stems from the very simple task of asking. It's confidently, lovingly, passionately asking. And a really great example of this is Michelle was working in IT sales. This is about 2 years ago. And we decided we want to go to Maui. And she had a month off of work. And I'm sorry, a week or two off of work, because we had taken other vacation and we had gone to Burning Man and camping and a few other things. So she didn't have that much vacation left out of her 3 weeks. And we wanted to take a month off. And we just got really confident, and she's like, I'm just going to ask for it off. I'm going to see if I can work maybe a week out of it and take 3 weeks off, or work 2 weeks and get 2 weeks off as vacation. And she even mentioned it to a couple coworkers, and they're just like, oh no, that'll never happen, because it never has happened in the company. So their frame of reference was, oh no, it hasn't happened, it won't happen. And she just asked, but she asked in a way that was confident. She asked in a way that says, look, I will still provide value. I can still work. I'll still be responsive, and I'll still make sure that I'm on top of things, but here's why I want to do it. And, it took a couple back and forth, but we spent almost 5 weeks in Maui. The fact that she was actually able to do it, and all of her coworkers gave her the feedback of, I cannot believe that you actually do it. And she's like, all you have to do sometimes is really ask and show your case, and the worst that they can say is no. But what it just tells me is sometimes all we have to do is ask, right? If what would be meaningful to you is to maybe just have a half day on a Friday, or just to take Wednesday off so you didn't have to drive in doing a 2-hour commute every day. And just that alone would just kind of release a lot of anxiety. Like if you could work from home Tuesday, Thursday, and only had to make a commute Monday, Wednesday, Friday, how would that affect your lifestyle? So there's little things, there's little wins, there's little ways that we can start to build this in. You don't have to leave. I have a lot of friends that are in corporate, and they love their job. I mean, just love their jobs. One of my buddy is the head of, they build robots that do surgeries for humans, and he's the head of this whole team, and he works a lot, but he loves what he does, and he is so good at what he does, and what he does just really helps the world. And he shouldn't be in entrepreneurship. He should be doing exactly what he's doing, facilitating this team that's helping people and health. But how does he integrate maybe more things into his lifestyle that allows him to do more of the things that is aligned with his heart? So, getting back to crafting your ideal lifestyle, it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. It doesn't have to be these radical leaps. But how do we start to integrate a lifestyle that is very fulfilling to you as an individual?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody that's at a Big Four accounting firm, and which is very. A lot of times they're very high level dressed, right? Everybody's showing up in suits, and just the environment that they're in. And she was telling me, like, you know what? It felt really good. I started wearing tennis shoes. And it could be. I love the example of starting where you're at and whatever you're doing. She ultimately has a dream of where she wants to go, and she's building a plan to get there. But she's like, I'm going to build a 2-year plan. I'm going to save, and I'm doing it. But meanwhile, I like to wear tennis shoes. I feel really good when I wear shoes. It makes me feel more relaxed. I feel like I can focus more. I'm not focusing on being uncomfortable. I'm focusing on being comfortable. And she just started wearing them, and she cleans them so they look nice. It's just not like it looks clean, so it still fits. But a lot of people give her a hard time, and she's just doing them. And so far, she hasn't had any problems. And her next step is going in to ask if, just like what you mentioned a minute ago, hey, can I work Fridays from home as long as because they track a lot of things by utility, like how are you utilizing your time? And she does the same thing. She drives an hour to work and an hour back. She's like, man, if I use those other 2 hours to do something fulfilling for myself once a week, could I be more productive? Could I actually use more utilization time and hit the metrics of the company? So I think I loved your point. Everybody's got a different thing that works. It's finding what your flow is. I think for me, something you were saying earlier that I wanted to comment on, that's been probably the biggest game changer. I definitely love the vacations. Because I'm in a similar boat as you, where if I want to do something, I just go. And I really like that. There's something that's fulfilling for me that feels like I'm on my schedule. And I'm doing so freeing to be like, if I want it, I do it and I block it. And I'm blocking my calendar kind of first. And then now as I've set up a business around it, I definitely make those are the priorities around it. Where there's specific times or workshops or retreats or whatever specifically going on. But I think what you mentioned and as you were saying, I just felt such resonance was my day. I really feel fulfilled being able to create my day each day. And, for me, it's something really simple, like waking up when I want to wake up. Sometimes it's 6, like lately it's been 6 or 5:30. Other times it's 9 or 10 and I'm sleeping till when I want to wake up. And then getting up and going, either working for a couple hours first, and because I'm really firing, and then jumping on my bike and riding to the gym and getting a long workout in. And then, so I really like what you said, because to me, that's brought me a lot of fulfillment. I remembered before I would do that, I remember feeling like I wasn't in flow with my natural rhythms, which were my work. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I could be so much more effective, so much more efficient if I was in alignment, and creating the environment to be in alignment. You start to kind of find your flow, where sometimes when you're just not creative or you're not inspired or you're not productive, you can go play, and you can go play, do something that feels fun, and you kind of get a lot of fulfillment from it. And then you come back recharged and ready to motivate. Or if you're on a run, you just keep going. You might burn 3-4 days and, and work until 2 or 3 and get up early, or work till 2 or 3, sleep in, get up. And then, so to me, that freedom feels really fulfilling. And maybe it starts there. Maybe it's something where you start really simple of, how do I start being fulfilled where I'm at today and enjoying my lifestyle a little bit more? And then as you're doing that, you're creating the ultimate vision and testing little things to see what feels good, and then finding ways to influence your current environment so that you can start living it now. Yeah. And you can start creating it now as you're building more towards that vision. And I like what you said, the vision changes. And I think it's something else to be mindful of. The vision you think you might want, and I totally related what you said earlier. I dreamed of backpacking with a backpack since I was like in college. And I remember thinking, oh, my story was once I make enough money, then I'll go backpacking. And so I was working, never saving. Always burning. I was like swinging for the fence, and before I think I was 30, around there 30, 32 when I finally went backpacking, and I think that was the difference. I think if I would have been in college when I first had that vision, or right out of it, and I would have taken off on a backpacking trip, I think I would have wanted to stay backpacking. But I think what happened is I changed, and now at 30, 32, it was still fun, but it was different, and so. I think that's a really good thing, too. If you're hearing yourself say, the reason I bring up this story, if you're picturing a story that you've been visioning and you haven't done it, what if it's not the vision anymore? Like, what if you've been visioning, I want to go do this, and I'm going to finally do this when I get to this, and then you finally go do it, and that's not the vision. The vision has changed. So it's like if we're not doing it now, if we're not doing at least little pieces, I find you don't really know, and you don't get to experience it.
Right. And this is where the clarity comes in, because just based on your example, you have been holding this on, this kind of ideal lifestyle, or this ideal item that you want to do was to go backpacking, and you're holding it. This is where clarity comes in. What's fulfilling to you now, in the moment, who you are now? So it's like, cool, I'm 30, I finally have the time and the resources and the money to go do that, but now I'm holding an ideal lifestyle of 22-year-old Josh, but now I'm 32-year-old Josh. And, surprise, 32-year-old Josh, it's a little different. Now, sometimes that piece of your life is still the same, right? Like, I geek out on technology. I am a technology geek. I love gadgets and computers, and I love that stuff. And whatever was fulfilling for me 10 or 20 years ago in the tech stuff, just as fulfilling to me now. I love that stuff. But travel and other things, that shifts. And so a lot of times we hold on to what we think we'd love to do. Just like in the example of my friend who went traveling, that was something that they had been holding on to 10 years ago. But they kept pushing in their head. They're like, oh, this is my ideal thing. This is what I'm wanting. This is what I'm wanting. But they weren't really clear if that was in alignment with who they are. That ideal trip was not in alignment with 32-year-old Josh. That was still 22-year-old Josh, right?
Totally. But I will tell you this, one of the things that I learned that was so powerful from it, and that's really set me free, is the first time I'd ever gone for that long of a time where I made no plans. I literally had zero. I've always been so structured that it was, and I'd usually like research a place. I'd buy all the books. I was so like educated about it. And it was a practice of connecting with my heart. So my journey was, let me get out of my head and just follow the flow. And I literally made no plans. I showed up off a plane, had no plans, no place to stay, no place to go, nothing. And I literally just let kind of the wind take me, and whatever felt good I did. And I will say, I learned from that experience. For me to be fulfillment, I'm so structured that I like scheduling. So it's funny, it is scheduling, but scheduling in time to be that free, where I'm like, okay, here's the plan, and there I go with the total flow, and I don't make any plans, and that's really, I find, fulfilling for me to feel, and to feel what feels good and to explore, versus doing the research ahead of time. So it's, again, I feel like you don't learn. So again, back to the conversation of what is your ideal lifestyle. I think it's a mixture of starting with the vision and starting with the clarity, and then through experience you start to go, oh, this is the clarity I thought I had, but now that I'm experiencing it, it's actually kind of tweaked to here. And I think that's how you create the art. I think that is the art, is mixing your vision of what you feel like, or what you imagine it to be like, and then as you start to explore and experience more and more, that vision continues to change. So I think it's just like you're saying, the mixture of your vision of clarity in your mind's eye, or your higher self's eye, or whatever feels fun or sounds exciting, combined with experience and continuing to evolve that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's about listening to your heart and then also getting in there and getting that feedback with your heart, getting that feedback with your body, getting that feedback from the environment to say, is this in alignment with my heart? Does this feel good? And sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect to what we think we want and to what we really want, and that comes from the head, right? That comes from the mind, and sometimes we can conjure stories based on a whole magnitude of background stuff, whatever that happens to be, whether it's other people's pressures about us or what we think we want or whatever it happens to be. But getting still, I think sometimes just being a little bit more of in a calmer space allows those kind of insights to come in. But I think all in all, a lot of times we really don't know until we actually jump in the water.
And so this really brings us into a great segue on the second part of this podcast about defining your ideal lifestyle, in which we specifically talk about how do we craft and define our defining lifestyle with our partner.
Visit us at masteringfulfillment.com for other podcasts such as these, or if you're looking to take your personal fulfillment to another level, feel free to get in contact with either myself or Joshua Warner.